I'm Peter Levine, the director of the Defense Management Institute, and I'm here today as a part of a planned series of interviews of individuals who've made significant contributions to improving the management of the Department of Defense. Today, I'll be speaking with Michael Rhodes, who started his military career as a non-commissioned officer in Alaska in the 1980s, and rose to serve for more than a decade as the top management official in the Pentagon, the Pentagon's Director of Administration and Management. Mike served as the DA&M during my time in the Pentagon, so I know him well. Over the course of a 35-year career, Mr. Rhodes developed a deep commitment to the department and an exceptional understanding of how to get things done in one of the world's largest bureaucratic organizations. Mr. Rhodes, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Peter. That was a unique beast. The headquarters had just moved, so it had actually moved, but the components were still moving out of Panama. So it was getting the headquarters settled in a non-military environment, non-military installation. It was a leased building in the middle of an office park, and that's what we had to start with. And making sure they stayed effective, but also the charge from the commander at the time. It was a Marine, first time there was a Marine commander, actually. It had always been a lineage of Army commanders, but General Charlie Wilhelm. And his charge to me was, I want this to be a location people want to take the assignment to, want to get the assignment to, and are not avoiding the assignment from. And so that was setting up an environment that their families wanted to stay at as well. They didn't have any of the traditional support. The other challenge there was the fact that we were moving the U.S. Army, we were at Navy, the Air Force, all the other Marine components out to other locations as well. So setting that architecture where it would be able to be sustained. So it was a unique challenge. But it actually, as we talked about it with the Pentagon and we would come back and discuss the approaches we were trying to take, we also were testing some other vehicles. Do you have to have all these services at every location in order to be supportive, or can you make it work in that environment? But it's a completely civilian community that we're working to set the command into. I think it is a bit too much for one individual. I also have a bias against the combination to a degree because I think it compromises the DA&M as an enduring role. I think that position, and traditionally has been a career civilian that's been in the role, carrying from administration to administration. I think there's great value to that. I think the performance improvement officer brings on a degree of a political element. And quite frankly, I'm concerned that it can be perceived as a political position whenever they have the next transition, whether it's in a year or 5 years from now, which typically they are all asked to mostly depart for the next team to come in. And I think that compromises. So combination, I'm not sure you can put all the energy and effort into both functions fully. I don't know if it's completely impossible to, but I also worry about that other dynamic as well.
So you've seen lots of different variations over the time you were in the Pentagon as to how this was going to be, how the role of central management was going to be arranged, how we're going to organize the chairs. Do you have any views as to what would be better?
As far as
So we don't have a CMO anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We do have this dual heading, which is potentially problematic. Before we had the CMO, we had Gordon England and Robert Rangel doing an awful lot of the work out of the deputy secretary,
Yes.
out of the secretary's office and the deputy secretary's office. Before that, we had other combinations. We had the Business Transformation Agency. We've had a number of different mechanisms over the last. I guess we're just talking the last 20 years with those different arrangements, including both a DCMO and a CMO.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to have an effectiveness externally, first off. So obviously you've been selected and appointed by the president. There's some degree of trust and confidence and faith that's in there. You've got to also understand the Hill. People have different positions and opinions, but you have to respect that entity and have a relationship or the ability to maintain the relationship there as well. So I think that's critical. Then it's an open mind. It's an open mind. You got to be a strong decision maker, but the only way you can be effective with that is having an open mind in the process, pulling in information from all sides, whether you want to hear it or not. I think it's an appreciation that moving the department is not an easy thing to do, but then taking that a step further and wonder why and question why and find out how to break the code. The components department, we're just going to go with form. Okay, so you got military services, and then we're gonna have this one over here for the combatant anything. But you've got 28 components of the department. They're all trying to serve God and country, and they're trying to go forward. They're trying to do the right thing, but they're going forward. They're not hitting a point. When I left the military services, I will tell you one thing: Army and Marine Corps headquarters either, they knew where that service chief went with the top uniform, and they went more on a point than they did go into direction. They're all trying to do good things, but it's understanding that. And so you have to be checking back. Whatever your priorities are, you have to be checking back and make sure they're heading to the point that you want to get to. And it's impossible in that role to find time, but they do find time for their priorities and their requirements. And how they survive through those jobs, I'll never understand watching them from afar, but they do, and they have capacity. But you have to go back to the touch points and see that it's really headed there. I'd submit that we talked about it's not just tenure, but that's part of it. You mentioned about Secretary Carter. He went back to his touch points, and he always was checking back on where are we on that. It could be a couple of appointments that I was working, or some of the secondary things, or some other issues. But he'd always find the opportunity to come back to ask about that, and you never lost the fact that he's going to come back and ask me about that. By tenure, I think on behalf of Secretary Gates, Robert Rangel always knew to be checking: are we all rowing towards the same point, not just the same direction? It's a need to do that. That's the challenge. I think probably in the macro, it's the latter. It's finding how we use our resources more effectively, as effectively as we can. It's achieving some of the goals change, some of the priorities change, but it's still applying the resources to that most effectively and efficiently, and pulling out waste. And I think by some of the processes, procedures, we got to keep people believing that what we're buying is not another $600 hammer or those other sort of things, but it makes us go very slow in some of our acquisition. And then finding that that's too slow and we need to speed it up, we start giving new authorities on how we can acquire things. But then we also want to make sure that we can prove that it was done independently and appropriately in the process. That's not all efficiency by private sector or other standards necessarily, and we can't just hack off all the margins and keep doing that. So we build in a little bit of complexity, but I think at the end of the day, our challenges we keep trying to attack are not that different.